Today, with over 130 degrees and certificates, a vibrant campus, renowned academic and career technical programs, and a growing reputation for its affordability and student-first approach, Lewis Clark State College is stronger than ever. Enrollment has climbed by 20% over the past decade. Graduates are at an all-time high, and major plans to expand campus are in place. But none of this growth would be possible were it not for the solid foundation that has been laid over the past 125 years. So as we celebrate the bright prospects of tomorrow, let us first honor the efforts and accomplishments of the past. Founded in 1893 at the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater Rivers, Lewis Clark State College's rich history is one of hardships and heroics. But a central theme throughout it all is an undying passion to succeed. This spirit of perseverance helped the school overcome an inauspicious start. It carried it through a devastating fire, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, a host of political challenges over the decades, and it continues to live on today in the hearts and minds of its students, who simply won't take no for an answer.
The city was founded in May of 1861 and was incorporated in January of 1863. So it is the oldest incorporated city in the state. And by the 1890s, it was a very bustling community. It was ready for development, and Normal Hill was almost completely undeveloped.
1893 was probably the worst year of a depression or recession that Idaho has ever seen.
In 1893, there was a severe economic collapse in the United States. It was catastrophic.
There was panic all over the United States and in Idaho.
Thousands upon thousands of businesses failed in the United States in 1893.
And that was the year they chose to establish Lewis Clark State College. It was not a good year to do that. There was no funding given to the institution. No buildings were built at first. On the second floor of a business in downtown Lewiston, classes began, and the first student body was established.
The campus we're on right now was actually designated as a 20-acre city park. It's going to be developed in the future. So this area was sand dunes. Nobody was here. Prime area. Why not go ahead and donate this?
The community donated the land that Lewis Clark State College now sits on, and the school was established.
So when the building went up and it was opened in June of 1896, it was a huge event. Because you came up over the top of that 5th Street grade and you see that huge building in distance with a few homes. It was pretty stunning.
The classes were moved to the new building, which still stands today, and we were on our way.
17 female students made up Normal's first graduating class in 1898. First President George Knepper said, "If a class 1/3 as large as the present one had happened before you at this time for graduation, it would have been looked upon as an excellent beginning for this state Normal." Truly, it was an excellent beginning for the young institution, and it laid a solid foundation for growth at the turn of the century under the school's second president, George H. Black.
In 1899, they wanted to have dormitories on campus. Lewiston was the site of the very first college dormitories in the state. They built 2 dorms over here. There were men's and women's dorms, what they call boys and girls dorms. Because you gotta remember, the students who came here were only 15, 16 years old. When they built those were not built with a lot of state money. They were built with local support. They weren't really well built because they didn't think they were going to have to last. The state would come in. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They were pretty rudimentary, but it was fitted out with local support. People donated a piano or draperies or tables. The community came in a very big way to support the school. Black came in wanting to build this campus up. He was really a proponent. That's why we see some of the buildings on this campus. And so they built this beautiful dormitory. It was built in 1907, opened in early 1908. And then, of course, what Thomas Jefferson was built during Black's administration. The old gymnasium, he got that built. So he came in with a lot of building.
Reed Centennial Hall, as it's called today, was that very first building that was built on the campus at Lewis Clark State College.
There used to be a wing that ran to 6th Street. It held all of the training school, the library, the registrar's office. It was a very large complex.
A crisis that occurred early on in the history of Lewis Clark State College was in 1917. Somehow, a fire started, and it did a tremendous amount of damage to what is now called Reed Centennial Hall.
Nearly killed 2 firemen because when the walls collapsed, they couldn't save the building, but by the time they got here, it was fully engulfed.
The very next day, when our library had been completely destroyed and there were no books, the president came out on the steps of the remaining parts of the building that had not burned and announced that classes would resume that very day.
Oliver Elliott was president at the time. He was kind of a mild-mannered guy, and he just swung with the punches. He was the right guy at the right time.
That just shows you the spirit of Lewis Clark State College. In the face of that kind of adversity, it wasn't going to stop us from doing the job we know that we can do. People took notice of Lewis Clark State College and the techniques they were using to train teachers. It was a state-of-the-art facility. Unfortunately, that fire burned it down. Well, the resolve that it took, it only fired that enthusiasm even more. So it's a good metaphor for what has happened and the challenges that Lewis Clark State College has faced over the years.
First library on campus was developed by Talkington. And that library had about 10,000 volumes, which is a lot of books. You lose that, you lose a lot, because that's your training. I mean, you can't say, well, let's go down to the library and research this point. You can't do that. So it forced the state legislature to rush into funding to get a new building, which is the one we call the Ad Building today, which is from 1921.
The Great Depression introduced unparalleled hardship across the nation, and Lewiston Normal School and the state of Idaho were not immune. As funding became scarce and enrollment declined, threats of closure and accusations of expendability only increased. But it was during this dark valley that Lewiston Normal began to truly hone in on and embrace an axiom that still guides the institution today. Find what needs to be done and do it well. And for Lewiston Normal, this was teacher education. Teaching is an art just as truly as is medicine, or dentistry, or law, or the ministry, President Turner said in 1936. We recognize that doctors and dentists must be trained in medical schools, lawyers in law schools, and engineers in engineering schools. Likewise, teachers must be trained in teacher training schools. It was this kind of focus that allowed the institution to receive numerous accreditations in the 1930s and set the stage for a new era of bold confidence and achievement in the decade to come. Truly ahead of its time. In 1941, under President Glenn Todd, Lewiston Normal announced a number of innovations, including night and weekend classes, and programs designed specifically for working adults, something the college still emphasizes today. In addition, new classes were developed in disciplines like art, English, geography, history, math, biology, education, and music. But before much of this new vision could be realized, Lewiston Normal was asked to answer a different call. On December 7, 1941, just one day before many of President Todd's new initiatives were to go into effect, Pearl Harbor was attacked and the United States entered World War II. Ready to do its part, Lewiston Normal was transformed into one of the Navy Civil Aviation Administration's air training units, and by 1943 had already trained more than 1,500 flyers, more than any other unit in the country.
Bert Simmerly is over in Clarkston at the big old airfield where Walmart and Costco are today. There was an airfield over there. They were training pilots for the United States Navy. Well, their classroom building was here. Harris Field was just a big open area, and they had an obstacle course set up. So they took their physical training, they had the swimming pool in the gymnasium, they took classes here. There was an infirmary on campus that they used. So it was all in consortium with Zimmerly to provide pilots.
The federal government gave Lewiston Normal 3 responsibilities during World War II: produce teachers, train nurses, and teach naval cadets how to fly. Lewiston Normal excelled at all 3 and continues to excel at producing quality teachers and nurses to this day. After the war, thousands of America's veterans with GI Bill in hand began enrolling at colleges and universities across the country. Northern Idaho College of Education, eager to capitalize on this opportunity, took great pride in serving this important segment of the population and in serving them well, a charge that it still holds today.
After the war, they had to have more nurses. And so they started a nursing school. They got the state to give them a certification. Well, they didn't have any classrooms. So they came over here for classes. Glenn Todd becomes president of the college in 1941. He came in with a little bit different attitude because he had been superintendent of Lewiston schools. He had stationery that read Northern Idaho College of Education. It wasn't the Northern Idaho College of Education, it was Lewiston State Normal School. He hated the name. He said, we're a college of education. He said, we're never going to be stable until we sound like what we really are purposed to do. In 1947, he finally got the legislature to change the name of the school. And they did. And they made it a 4-year school.
By the end of the 1940s, NICE was a bustling campus with enrollment on the rise, having grown from 200 students in 1944 to 600 in 1950, and campus expanding in every direction. After years of struggle, a golden age had finally seemed to dawn. But it would come to a crashing halt when Governor Len Jordan finally got his wish.
In 1951, by one vote in the legislature, closed the then Northern Idaho College of Education. That was a terrible blow.
This legislature didn't have enough money, so they just didn't fund it anymore. After you're in operation for 30, 40 years, you become pretty well invested in the communities around this area and in the community here. When the campus was closed down in 1951, the city rose up in arms over it. I mean, they really got angry about it. They protested. They sent delegations to Boise. They did everything they could but go out and tar and feather. Governor Jordan was hung in effigy, I should say, from Lewis Hall. As early as 1944 and 1945, the Lewiston School Board understood that when this war came to an end, they were going to see a huge rise in school population within about 5 or 6 years. So in 1948, the school district opened 3 new elementary schools, and they were swamped, absolutely swamped with children. You see, the first baby boom children are hitting the schools by about 1953, 54. And the state knew right away this was not going to work. They said, we've got to do something about this. The school's sitting there, it's just vine covered, let's go down there, we've got an investment. So they open it back up, but they don't open it as Northern Idaho College of Education. They open it up as Lewis Clark Normal School. It goes back to a 2-year status just to get teachers out in the field. Okay, this is rush. Okay, let's just get them out in the field as fast as we can. They do not appoint a president. The University of Idaho takes the oversight, and they send a dean down here for a few days a week, maybe 3 days a week, has an office here, and he administers the school. But from that period, from 55 to 67, there were all kinds of efforts to sell it off. Bob Jones, who was actually the archivist of the old Talkington Museum, he called Ed Williams Conference Center. Williams and Jones went to the city and pulled out a city ordinance. When the city gave the property to the campus in 1907, there was a provision that if they ever tried to sell it, everything reverted back to the city. Hell, did that squelch the deal? They were saved by a piece of paper.
In 1963, Lewis Clark Normal was declared independent from the University of Idaho, and it once again became a 4-year school. With its newly obtained autonomy, one of the first actions the school took was to establish a vocational arm of the college, one that could meet the demand of industry for more skilled laborers. Lewis Clark Normal moved quickly, and by 1965, had added a vocational school and named Marion Shin as its director. 3 years later, the Sam Glen Vocational Complex was added, the first building to be constructed on the campus since 1951. And today, career and technical education continues to be a hallmark of the institution, with expansion plans in the future bigger and more closely aligned with industry than ever.
The nursing shortage that began back in the 50s and the 60s was acute, and we knew it. And that's why we decided to start a nursing program at Lewis Clark State College. And it's grown into one of the best nursing programs, I'd say, in the Northwest, if not the best.
But by the 1960s, Mrs. Smiley, Governor Smiley's wife, came on board and said, no, we need to have absolute RN training in the state of Idaho. So she championed that and got a school started here. Well, when the school was started, it was very low budget and very small. Grace Smith, who had been a public school nurse, she was a graduate of Stanford nursing school, so they're very well trained. She's chosen to head the nursing school. They go over into here in Thomas Jefferson Hall, go to the 3rd floor, they get 2 or 3 little rooms, and get donated beds. The kids had to give them each other injections. They had no technology. They start the nursing school. They trained under the really primitive conditions, and they went on to wonderful careers.
I could say the same thing about teacher education. Our education, teaching teachers, is probably the best. I know it's the best in the state, and our teachers are recruited from all over the region.
To be called a normal school was, by 1960s and 70s, that was not a compliment. It was old.
While the college's commitment to students, the community, and Idaho has never wavered, one thing that has changed over the years, and frequently, has been the college's name. It was founded as Lewiston State Normal School. In 1947, it became Northern Idaho College of Education. And in 1955, it was reopened as Lewis Clark Normal School. Finally, in 1971, the growing Lewiston School landed on a name that stuck: Lewis Clark State College.
But to go to State College, that was a big move. So yeah, and Lewis Clark, leave it Lewis Clark. Well, because Lewis and Clark came down the Clearwater River.
In the 1970s and 1980s, Lewis Clark State College's footprint began to grow exponentially. In 1972, LCSC's long and storied history with the Nez Perce tribe begins to flourish as the Lewis Clark American Indian Club is founded, and the school makes a concerted effort to design better classes to serve Native American students. One of only a few schools to offer a minor in the Nez Perce language, LCSC continues to celebrate this special relationship with its annual Native American Awareness Week. In 1982, LCSC expanded its already blossoming international outreach by establishing the International Exchange Conference, a program that would bring hundreds of international businessmen and students to Lewiston. Today, the school is home to students from over 30 countries. In 1984, Ed Chef's Warriors won the first of what is now 19 national baseball titles. The championship, hosted that year for the first time at LCSC, elevated the college to a national stage and has since served as a rallying point for the college's undying quest for excellence, both on the field and off.
To say that our baseball program is successful is to understate it. It's a phenomenal program. Not to mention, we have well over 100 of our players have played professional ball. 16 have played in the major leagues. And so it is an important part of the culture of the community once again. This has always been a baseball town. When the community got together and decided to support Lewis Clark State College baseball and brought the Avista NAIA World Series here to Lewiston, the college could not have done that without the support of the community.
I don't think you can talk about Lewiston, Idaho without talking about the college, and you can't talk about the college without talking about Lewiston. I mean, they began together. They were hand in hand. And the college wouldn't be where it sits today if it hadn't been for the city having the foresight. I mean, they invested a lot. You think of the value of the property, they just donated because they had some faith that that school would be successful. We've had a number of champions here. Well, that's why some of the buildings are named after certain people. It's because they did a lot for us. They knew that this meant a lot to the community. Education may be expensive, but ignorance is a lot more expensive. Today, you need an educated civilian population.
I can say without fear of contradiction that this school would not be here if it weren't for the community in which it resides. The thing that LCSC has learned and has put into its fabric is we are here for the students. Lewis Clark State College is very much like its students. They are tenacious, they are hardworking, they persevere, and they succeed.
A lot of people told them they couldn't build a school here. They did. A lot of people told them they couldn't do that kind of program. It wouldn't work in Idaho. It did. You couldn't open the school. They did. You couldn't win the national championship. They did. The people who say it can't be done should get out of the way of those who are already doing it.
The Lewiston State Normal School saw many hard times. In World War I, they rose to the occasion. The Great Depression, they got through that crisis. They adapted and became a center where pilots were trained for World War II.
Yeah, we had a slack period. It was tough for us. We got closed down. That doesn't define us. Forget about the things where there were failures. Let's bring the good forward and redo it.
So I would add, besides that tenacious and can-do attitude, they see their role as responding as times change, and they don't let anything get in the way.
I've enjoyed working with presidents, clear back to Dr. Sims. They were people that fit the need at the time. Now, would Dr. Sims be right for the job now? No, because he fit the need of the 1950s, early 60s. But for where we are now, we're in place.
Lewis Clark State College just doesn't tolerate defeat. And if something happens that blocks what the institution wants to do, the institution and the community that supports it come together and become a force that has to be reckoned with.